How you doing? John Riggs here. I came into the studio this morning, or this afternoon rather, and I saw this, Left for Risha. For Willow, and I knew exactly what this book was, one of my favorite children's books of all time. Miss Nelson is missing! Have you read this book before? If not, let me read it for you. It's one of my favorites. I don't mind reading it too. So, Miss Nelson is missing. Little story time with John Riggs here. I hope you enjoy. Miss Nelson is Missing by Harry Allard and James Marshall. The kids, I don't know if you can see that all right. The kids in room 207 were misbehaving again. Spitballs stuck to the ceiling, there were paper planes whizzing throughout the air. They were the worst behaved kids in the whole school. Worst behaved class in the whole school. Now settle down, said Miss Nelson in her sweet voice. But the class would not settle down. They whispered and giggled. They squirmed and made faces. They were even rude during story hour. And they always refuse to do their lessons. Something will have to be done, said Miss Nelson. The next morning, Miss Nelson did not come to school. Wow, yelled the kids, now we can really act up. They began to make more spitballs and paper planes. Today let's just be terrible, they said. Not so fast, hissed an unpleasant voice. Look at the upside down girl over here. A woman in an ugly black dress stood before them. I am your new teacher, Miss Viola Swamp. She rapped the desk with her ruler. Where's Miss Nelson? Asked the kids. Never mind that, snapped Miss Swamp. Open those arithmetic books. Miss Nelson's kids did as they were told. They could see that Miss Swamp was a real witch. She meant business. Right away, she put them to work. She had loaded them down with their homework. We'll have no story hour today, said Miss Swamp. Keep your mouths shut, said Miss Swamp. Sit perfectly still, said Miss Swamp, and if you misbehave, you'll be sorry, said Miss Swamp. Days went by and there were no sign of Miss Nelson. The kids missed Miss Nelson. Oh, the kids in room 207 have never worked so hard. Maybe we should try to find her, they said. Some of them went to the police. Detective Mr. Smog was the assistant on the case. He listened to the story, scratched his chin. He said, I think Miss Nelson is missing. Detective Smog would not be of much help. Some detective he is, right? Other kids went to Miss Nelson's house. Shades were tightly drawn and no one answered the door. In fact, the only person they did see was the wicked Miss Viola Swamp coming down the street. If she sees us, they'll give us more homework. She'll give us more homework. So they got away just in time. Maybe something terrible happened to Miss Nelson. Maybe she was gobbled up by a shark, said one of the kids. But that didn't seem likely. I don't know, what do you think? Maybe Miss Nelson went to Mars, said another kid. But that didn't seem very likely either. I know, exclaimed the one know-it-all. Maybe Miss Nelson's car was carried off by a swarm of angry butterflies. But that was the least likely of all. The kids in room 207 became very discouraged. It seemed like Miss Nelson was never coming back. And we were going to be stuck with Miss Viola Swamp forever. They heard footsteps in the hall. Here comes the witch, they whispered. Hello, children, someone said in a very sweet voice. Who do you think it is? It was Miss Nelson. Did you miss me, she asked. We certainly did, cried all the kids. Where were you? Well, that's my little secret, said Miss Nelson. How about a story hour? Oh, yes, cried the kids. Miss Nelson noticed that during story hour, no one more was rude or silly. What brought about the lovely change, she asked. That's our little secret, asked the kids. Very nice classroom. What do you think happened? Back home, Miss Nelson took off her coat and hung it in the closet right next to an old, ugly black dress. When it was time for bed, she sang a little song. I'll never tell, she said to herself with a smile. So, who do you think Miss Viola Swamp was? P.S. Detective Smog is still working on the new case. He is now looking for Miss Viola Swamp. Miss Nelson is missing. One of my favorites. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed our little story time. I might make this a regular segment. We'll see.